The Valdrics had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. No one remembered a time before their empire. No one dared to imagine a time after it. Their warships moved through space like a plague, destroying everything in their path. They did not conquer for resources or territory. They conquered because they could. They conquered because they believed it was their right. Every species that rose to challenge them was crushed. Every rebellion was burned to ash. Every world that refused to bow was turned to dust. Commander Zorath stood in the throne room of his flagship, the Eternal Wrath. The room was made of black stone, cold and empty except for the massive chair where he sat. Screens floated around him, showing images from across his empire. Slave ships moved between planets. Mining operations stripped entire moons of their metals. Prison worlds held millions of beings who had once dreamed of freedom. Zorath was old, even by Valdric standards. He had lived for over 800 years, and in that time, he had seen countless species try to resist. They all failed. They always failed. The Valdrics were simply too powerful, too advanced, too ruthless. An officer entered the throne room and knelt before him. "Commander, we have completed the survey of the Outer Rim." Zorath did not look at him. "And what did you find?" "A new species, Commander. They call themselves humans. They live on a small blue planet called Earth." "How advanced are they?" "Primitive, Commander. They only developed faster than light travel within the last 50 years. Their military is small. They have a few patrol ships and one experimental warship that has never been tested in battle." Zorath finally turned his head to look at the officer. His eyes were dark and cold, like the void between stars. "One warship?" "Yes, Commander. Our intelligence officers estimate that complete conquest would take less than one standard cycle. Perhaps even less." A sound came from Zorath's throat. It might have been a laugh. "Send the 3rd Subjugation Fleet. Let Admiral Kethris handle this. It will be good practice for his crew." The officer bowed and left the throne room. Zorath returned his attention to the screens. Another species to crush. Another world to add to his collection. He had done this so many times that it no longer brought him any satisfaction. It was simply routine. The humans would beg for mercy like all the others. They would offer everything they had in exchange for their lives. And then they would die anyway, because that was how the Valdrics conducted business. He did not give the humans another thought. Far across the galaxy, Admiral Kethris received his orders with excitement. He was young for a Valdric's commander, only 300 years old, and he was eager to prove himself. The 3rd Subjugation Fleet was his first major command, and he intended to make it a success. 500 warships assembled at the staging point. Each ship was massive, armed with plasma cannons that could burn through any known material. Their shields could withstand bombardment for days. Their crews were trained killers who had never known defeat. Kethris stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Silent Death, and addressed his fleet. "Today we bring another species into the fold. The humans are weak and primitive. They have no idea what is coming for them. Show them the power of the Valdrics. Show them what happens to those who stand in our way." The fleet entered hyperspace and disappeared into the void. On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work, children went to school, and governments argued about budgets and borders. Most humans had no idea that other intelligent life existed in the galaxy. The discovery of faster-than-light travel had been kept secret, shared only with a few nations and a handful of scientists. Captain Benjamin Cole knew the truth. He stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel, looking out at the stars through the main viewport. The Sentinel was humanity's greatest achievement, a warship built in secret over the course of 20 years. She was not beautiful. She was not elegant. She was a weapon pure and simple, designed for one purpose: to protect Earth from whatever threats might exist in the darkness of space. Benjamin was 43 years old. He had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from too many sleepless nights. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for a war that he hoped would never come. He had trained his crew until they could operate the ship in their sleep. He had studied every piece of intelligence that Earth scouts had gathered about alien species. He had run thousands of simulations, planning for scenarios that seemed impossible. Now those scenarios were becoming real. Lieutenant Commander Catherine Morris approached him with a tablet in her hands. She was his executive officer, a calm and steady woman who never seemed to panic. "Captain, we have received a priority transmission from command." Benjamin took the tablet and read the message. His face did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. "How long until they arrive?" "Our sensors detected them exiting hyperspace near Jupiter. At their current speed, they will reach Earth orbit in 6 hours. "How many ships?" Catherine hesitated. 500, sir." Benjamin set the tablet down on the console. 500 warships against one. The math was simple. The math was impossible. He looked around the bridge at his crew. Chief Engineer Samuel Patterson sat at the reactor controls, his fingers already moving across the panels as he prepared the ship for combat. Weapons Officer Danielle Marsh stood at the targeting array, her jaw tight with tension. Helm Officer Kevin Brooks sat at the navigation console, his hands steady even though his heart was racing. These were his people. He had trained with them, eaten with them, laughed with them. They trusted him with their lives. "Sir," Catherine said quietly, "Command is requesting that we stand down. They want to attempt diplomatic contact first." Benjamin nodded slowly. Diplomacy, negotiation, surrender. He understood why the politicians wanted to try. He understood the fear that drove them. But he had read the intelligence reports. He knew what the Valdrix did to species that surrendered. Slavery, torture, extinction. There would be no negotiation. There would be no surrender. There would only be survival or death. He turned to face his crew. They were watching him, waiting for orders, waiting for him to tell them what to do. "All hands," Benjamin said, his voice calm and clear. "Battle stations." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Alarms sounded throughout the ship. Crew members ran to their posts. Weapon systems came online. Shields powered up. The engines hummed with energy. Catherine moved to stand beside him. "Captain, command is ordering us to stand down." Benjamin reached up and turned off his earpiece. The voices of politicians and generals faded into silence. "The Sentinel does not stand down," he said. "Not today. Not ever." He looked out at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, 500 alien warships were coming to destroy his world. Everything he loved, everything he had ever known, was about to be tested. Benjamin Cole smiled grimly and prepared to meet the enemy. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The Valdrix fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 500 warships spread across the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a city in seconds. Admiral Catherus stood on the bridge of the silent death and looked at the blue planet in the distance. Earth, such a small world, such a fragile thing. He wondered how long it would take the humans to realize that their lives were already over. "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. His communications officer obeyed. Within moments, Catherus was broadcasting to every screen, every radio, every device on Earth. Billions of humans saw his face for the first time. They saw his gray skin, his black eyes, his rows of sharp teeth. They saw the face of their conqueror. "People of Earth," Catherus said, his voice translated into every human language. "I am Admiral Kethris of the Valdrix Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender immediately. You will hand over all weapons. You will submit to our rule. If you obey, some of you will be allowed to live as servants. If you resist, your planet will be burned to ash. You have 1 hour to respond." The transmission ended. On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. People ran through the streets screaming. Governments collapsed into chaos. Military leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to hide and hope the aliens would go away. In the United Nations building, world leaders gathered for an emergency session. The room was filled with shouting and crying. Nobody could agree on anything. The clock was ticking and humanity had no plan. But on the bridge of the USS Sentinel, there was no panic. There was only purpose. Captain Benjamin Cole had ignored the orders from command. He had turned off all communications with Earth. He knew that if he listened to the politicians, they would order him to stand down. They would tell him to wait. They would tell him to let diplomacy work. Benjamin knew that diplomacy would not work. The Valdrix had not come to talk. They had come to conquer. "How far are we from the enemy fleet?" he asked. Lieutenant Commander Catherine Morris checked her console. "Approximately 40 million kilometers, sir. They are holding position near Jupiter. What is our status?" Chief Engineer Samuel Patterson answered from his station. "All systems are operational, Captain. Reactors are running at full capacity. Shields are at maximum strength. Weapons are charged and ready." Benjamin nodded. The Sentinel was as ready as she would ever be. But he knew that one ship against 500 was not a battle. It was suicide. He did not care. Hell, set a course for the enemy fleet. Maximum speed. Kevin Brooks hesitated for just a moment. His hands trembled slightly over the controls. Then he took a deep breath and entered the commands. "Course laid in, sir. Engage." The Sentinel surged forward, her engines burning bright against the darkness of space. She was small compared to the Valdrix warships, but she was fast. Faster than anything the Valdrix had ever seen. On the Silent Death, a sensor officer reported the contact. "Admiral, we have detected a single human vessel approaching at high speed." Kethris frowned. "One ship? What are they doing?" "It appears they are on an attack course, Admiral." For a moment, Kethris said nothing. He could not understand what he was seeing. One ship against 500? It was madness. It was impossible. No species had ever been stupid enough to attack a Valdrix fleet with a single vessel. "They must be trying to negotiate," he said finally. "They will approach and then request terms for surrender. Ignore them for now. Let them come." But the Sentinel did not slow down. She did not send any messages. She did not request terms. She simply kept coming, faster and faster, a tiny spark of defiance in the endless dark. On the bridge of the Sentinel, Benjamin Cole watched the enemy fleet grow larger on the view screen. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He had trained for this moment his entire life. "Weapons officer, prepare all systems for combat." Danielle Marsh's fingers flew across her console. Missiles armed. Kinetic cannons charged. Electromagnetic pulse generators online. "All weapons ready, Captain. Target their command ships first. Then their supply vessels. Then their communication relays." Catherine looked at him with surprise. "Sir, that is not standard battle doctrine. We should target their weapons platforms first." "Standard doctrine is designed for standard enemies," Benjamin replied. "The Valdrix have never faced an opponent who fights dirty. They expect us to play by their rules. We are not going to play by their rules." The Sentinel crossed the 40 million kilometer gap in less than an hour. As she approached the Valdrix fleet, Cathris finally realized that something was wrong. "That ship is not slowing down," he said. "Why is it not slowing down?" "Admiral, their weapon systems are active. They are preparing to fire." Cathris felt something cold in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was doubt. He had never felt doubt before. "All ships, ray shields. Prepare for combat." But it was too late. The Sentinel dove into the heart of the Valdrix formation like a knife into flesh. She did not stop. She did not hesitate. She simply attacked, firing everything she had at targets that had never expected to be hit. The first missile struck a Bi-Red Valdrix command ship directly in its reactor core. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Before the debris had even finished spreading, the Sentinel had already moved to her next target. Danielle Marsh called out targets with cold precision. Command ship destroyed. Targeting supply vessel Alpha. Firing. Another explosion lit up the darkness. Supply vessel Alpha destroyed. Targeting communication relay. Firing. The relay vanished in a flash of light. On the silent death, Cathris watched in horror as his ships began to die. The human vessel was moving too fast for his gunners to track. She was appearing in places where no ship should be, firing weapons that his shields could not stop, and then disappearing before anyone could respond. "What is happening?" he shouted. "How is one ship doing this?" No one answered him. No one could answer him. They had never seen anything like this. They had never imagined that anything like this was possible. The Sentinel tore through the Valdrix fleet like a storm through paper. Within the first hour, she had destroyed 47 warships. Within the second hour, the number had risen to over 100, and still she kept fighting. On the bridge, the crew of the Sentinel worked in perfect harmony. Samuel Patterson kept the engines running beyond their limits. Kevin Brooks steered the ship through impossible maneuvers. Danielle Marsh fired weapon after weapon without missing a single shot. Catherine Morris coordinated everything, keeping track of damage reports and enemy positions, and at the center of it all stood Benjamin Cole, calm and steady, guiding his ship through the heart of hell. "Sir," Catherine said, "the enemy fleet is retreating." Benjamin looked at the view screen. She was right. The Valdrix ships were pulling back, trying to regroup. They had never retreated before. They had never needed to retreat. "Do not let them regroup," Benjamin ordered. "Stay on them. Keep firing." The Sentinel chased the retreating fleet, continuing her attack. More ships exploded. More Valdrix died. Humanity had sent one ship against 500, and one ship was winning. The battle had lasted for 6 hours. 6 hours of constant fighting. 6 hours of explosions and death and impossible survival. Admiral Cathris sat in his command chair on the silent death, staring at the tactical display with empty eyes. The numbers did not make sense. They could not make sense. His fleet had started with 500 warships. Now he had less than 350. One ship. One tiny human ship had done this. "Admiral," his second-in-command said carefully, "we must withdraw. We cannot continue this engagement." Cathris said nothing. His mind was trying to understand what had happened. The Valdrix had conquered thousands of species. They had never lost a battle. They had never even come close to losing a battle. Their tactics were perfect. Their technology was superior. Their warriors were the best in the galaxy. And yet they were losing to a single ship crewed by primitives who had only discovered space travel 50 years ago. "Admiral," his officer repeated, "your orders?" Cathris finally spoke. His voice was hollow. "Retreat. All ships, retreat to the staging point. We will regroup and request reinforcements from the Dominion." The order went out across the fleet. Surviving Valdrix ships turned away from Earth and prepared to jump into hyperspace. They moved slowly, like wounded animals crawling away from a predator. On the bridge of the USS Sentinel, Captain Benjamin Cole watched the enemy flee. His ship was damaged. Her hull was scarred with plasma burns. Several compartments had been breached and sealed. 17 crew members were dead, their bodies waiting in the cargo bay for a burial they might never receive, but they had one. Lieutenant Commander Catherine Morris stood beside him, her face pale with exhaustion. "Sir, the enemy fleet is withdrawing. Should we pursue?" Benjamin shook his head. "No, let them go. We have made our point." He turned to look at his crew. They were tired. They were hurt. Some of them were crying. But they were alive, and they had done something that no one in the galaxy had ever done before. "All hands," Benjamin said. "Stand down from battle stations. Begin damage assessment and repair operations." The tension on the bridge slowly released. People began to breathe again. Kevin Brooks slumped in his chair, his hands finally stopping their work on the navigation console. Danielle Marsh stepped back from the weapons station and wiped tears from her eyes. Samuel Patterson reported from engineering that the reactors were holding steady, though just barely. Catherine moved closer to Benjamin and spoke quietly so only he could hear. "Captain, Earth is trying to reach us. They want to know what happened." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Open a channel. I suppose I should tell them." The view screen flickered, and suddenly Benjamin was looking at a room full of world leaders. They were crowded around a table in what looked like the United Nations building. Their faces showed a mixture of shock, fear, and something that might have been hope. "Captain Cole," the Secretary General said, her voice trembling. "What have you done?" Benjamin smiled tiredly. "My job, ma'am. I protected Earth. You disobeyed direct orders. You were told to stand down. With respect, ma'am, if I had stood down, those ships would be orbiting Earth right now. They would be burning our cities. They would be killing our people." He paused. "I did what had to be done." The room was silent for a long moment. Then a man in a military uniform stood up. Benjamin recognized him as General Raymond Walsh, the commander of Earth's defense forces. "How many enemy ships did you destroy?" Walsh asked. 153 confirmed kills, sir. Possibly more. We damaged several others that may not survive the jump to hyperspace." Walsh sat down heavily. His face had gone white. 153. "With one ship?" "Yes, sir." "How?" Benjamin considered the question carefully. "We studied them, sir. We learned their tactics. We found their weaknesses. And we built a ship specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. The Valdrix have been fighting the same way for 3,000 years. They have never faced an enemy who thinks like we do. Far across the galaxy, news of the battle spread faster than any ship could travel. The Valdrix communication network was vast and efficient, designed to keep the Dominion informed of events across their empire. Within hours, every species under Valdrix rule knew what had happened. On the prison world of Cathar 4, a Sylvan named Tavorix gathered his people in a hidden cave beneath the surface. The Sylvan had been conquered 2,000 years ago. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. But as Tavorix read the reports of the battle near Earth, something stirred in his heart. "Listen," he said to his followers. "The humans have done what we thought was impossible. They have fought the Valdrix and won." An old Sylvan shook his head. "It was one battle. The Valdrix will return with more ships. The humans will be destroyed." "Perhaps," Tavorix said. "Or perhaps not. The Valdrix have never faced defeat before. They do not know how to handle it. They are afraid now, even if they will not admit it." He looked around at the faces watching him. "We have been slaves for 2,000 years. We have accepted our chains because we believed there was no alternative. But now there is hope. Now there is a chance. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. On mining colonies and slave ships, in hidden resistance cells and secret meeting places, species that had given up hope began to believe again. The humans had shown them something precious. The Valdrix could be hurt. The Valdrix could be beaten. On the Valdrix homeworld, Commander Zorath received the news of the Third Fleet's defeat with cold fury. He stood in his throne room, surrounded by his advisors, and listened as they tried to explain what had happened. "One ship," he said quietly. "One primitive ship destroyed over 150 of our warships. Admiral Kethris is requesting reinforcements," an advisor said nervously. "He believes that with a larger force—" "Kethris is a fool," Zorath interrupted. "He underestimated the humans. He paid the price for his arrogance." He turned to face his advisors. "I will not make the same mistake. Assemble the Grand Armada. Every available warship. Every reserve fleet. Every weapon we have." The advisors looked at each other with concern. "Commander, the Grand Armada has not been assembled in over 1,000 years. Is that truly necessary for one small species?" Zorath walked slowly to the window and looked out at the stars. "You still do not understand," he said. "The humans are not like the other species we have conquered. They are different, dangerous. If we do not destroy them now, while they are still weak, they will grow stronger. They will build more ships. They will teach others how to fight." He turned back to face his advisors. "The humans must be exterminated, completely, utterly, until not a single one remains." The advisors bowed and hurried to carry out his orders. The Grand Armada would take 6 months to assemble. 3,000 warships from every corner of the Dominion. The largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. And all of it would be aimed at one small blue planet called Earth. The humans had won their first battle, but the war was just beginning. 6 months passed quickly. Too quickly. On Earth, humanity worked with desperate speed. Factories that had once made cars and televisions now produced weapons and armor plating. Scientists who had spent their lives studying medicine and physics now designed shields and missiles. Every nation on the planet had put aside its differences to focus on one goal: survival. The USS Sentinel had been repaired and upgraded. Her hull was stronger now, reinforced with new alloys that human engineers had developed specifically to counter Valdrix plasma weapons. Her weapons had been improved based on data from the first battle. She was faster, tougher, and deadlier than before. But she was still just one ship. Captain Benjamin Cole stood in a massive shipyard, looking up at 3 new vessels that were nearly ready for launch. The USS Resolute, the USS Vanguard, the USS Defiance. 3 warships built from the lessons of his first engagement. 3 more weapons for humanity's defense. Catherine Morris walked up beside him. She looked tired, like everyone else on Earth these days. No one slept much anymore. There was too much work to do and too little time to do it. "The crews are ready," she said. "They have been trained day and night for the past 4 months." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Good. They will need every bit of that training. Do you think we can win?" He did not answer right away. The truth was that he did not know. 4 ships against 3,000 was still impossible odds. Even with the frigates and patrol craft that Earth had managed to build, their total fleet numbered less than 200 vessels. "We have to try," he said finally. "We have no other choice." Across the galaxy, similar preparations were being made. On Cathara 4, Terrorized had organized the Sylvan Resistance into a fighting force. They had stolen weapons from their Valdrix overseers. They had repaired old ships that had been abandoned in junkyards. They had trained in secret, preparing for the moment when they would finally strike back. "The humans are brave," Terrorized told his followers. but they cannot win alone. They need allies. They need us. How do we reach them? A young Sylvan asked. The Valdrics control all the hyperspace routes. Tavorik smiled. Not all of them. There are old paths that the Valdrics have forgotten. Smuggler routes. Pirate trails. We will use those. On a dozen other worlds, similar plans were being made. The Drazen, a species that had been enslaved to work in the Valdrics' mining operations, had begun sabotaging equipment and stockpiling weapons. The Kethrani, once proud warriors who had been defeated 500 years ago, started training in secret. Even the Morith, a peaceful species that had never fought anyone, began learning how to use weapons. The galaxy was waking up. Commander, Zorath received reports of unrest throughout the Dominion, but he dismissed them as minor disturbances. Slave rebellions happened from time to time. They were always crushed. What mattered now was the Grand Armada, which was finally assembled and ready to move. 3,000 warships, the largest fleet in the history of the galaxy. Zorath himself would lead them to Earth. He would watch personally as the humans were destroyed. How long until we reach the human homeworld? He asked. 2 weeks at standard. Hyperspace speed? His navigation officer replied. Then set course for Earth. It is time to end. This. The Grand Armada entered hyperspace and disappeared into the void. On Earth, sensors detected the massive fleet as soon as it emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Warning sirens sounded across the planet. Billions of people looked up at the sky and knew that their fate would be decided in the next few hours. Captain Benjamin Cole stood on the bridge of the Sentinel, watching the enemy fleet appear on his tactical display. 3,000 red dots spread across the screen like a disease. All ships report status, he ordered. One by one, the captains of Earth's fleet responded. The Resolute, commanded by Captain Lisa Grant. The Vanguard, commanded by Captain Marcus Webb. The Defiance, commanded by Captain Nathan Price. Behind them came the frigates and patrol craft. Small ships crewed by brave men and women who knew they might not survive the day. Less than 200 vessels against 3,000. This is Captain Cole to all ships, Benjamin said. You know what we are facing. You know the odds. But you also know what we are fighting for. We are fighting for our homes, our families, our future. The Valdrics think we are weak. They think we will surrender. They think they can destroy us like they have destroyed so many others. He paused. They are wrong. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today, we fight. The fleet moved into formation. The Sentinel took the lead, with the 3 other warships close behind. The smaller vessels spread out in defensive patterns, ready to support the larger ships. The Valdrics Armada approached slowly, confidently. Zorath watched from the bridge of the Eternal Wrath, pleased with what he saw. The human fleet was tiny compared to his own. This would be over quickly. All ships, prepare to attack, he ordered. Destroy everything. Leave no survivors. The 2 fleets closed the distance between them. Weapons charged. Shields activated. Every being in both fleets knew that the next few hours would change the galaxy forever, and then something unexpected happened. New contacts appeared on the sensors. Ships emerging from hyperspace behind the Valdrics fleet. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Zorath stared at his tactical display in confusion. What is this? Who are those ships? His sensor officer worked frantically at her console. Commander, we are detecting Sylvan vessels. Drazen raiders. Kethrani warships. They are attacking our rear guard. Zorath felt something cold grip his chest. The slave species. The conquered races. They were here. They were fighting. Impossible, he whispered. They would never dare. But they had dared. Tvorix led the Sylvan fleet directly into the Valdrix formation, firing everything he had. The Drazen raiders struck at supply ships and fuel tankers. The Kethrani targeted the command vessels with ancient weapons that still worked perfectly after 500 years. The galaxy was rising. On the bridge of the Sentinel, Catherine Morris reported the new contacts with a voice that trembled with emotion. "Captain, Allied vessels are engaging the enemy fleet. The Valdrix are caught between two forces." Benjamin Cole allowed himself a small smile. "Then let us not keep our friends waiting. All ships, attack." The human fleet surged forward. The Sentinel led the charge, just as she had 6 months ago. But this time, she was not alone. The final battle for Earth had begun. The battle was chaos. Ships exploded in every direction. Plasma bolts and missiles crossed the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. The screams of dying crews echoed across communication channels. 3,000 Valdrix warships fought against a coalition that had seemed impossible just hours ago. Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Wrath, watching his perfect formation crumble into disorder. The slave species were attacking from behind. The humans were attacking from the front. His commanders were panicking, sending confused messages and requesting orders that he could not give. "Focus fire on the human warships," he ordered. "Destroy them first, then we will deal with the others." But the human warships would not stay still. The Sentinel, Resolute, Vanguard, and Defiance moved through the battlefield like ghosts. They appeared in one place, fired their weapons, and vanished before the Valdrix could respond. Their tactics made no sense to enemies who had fought the same way for 3,000 years. Captain Benjamin Cole guided the Sentinel through the heart of the enemy fleet. His ship had taken damage. One of her engines was failing. Her shields were down to 30%. But she kept fighting. "Target the command ship," Benjamin ordered. The Eternal Wrath. Danielle Marsh worked her console with fingers that were bleeding from hours of constant work. "I see it, Captain. It is heavily defended. We will need to get closer." "Then we get closer. Helm, take us in." Kevin Brooks pushed the Sentinel forward, weaving between enemy ships and dodging plasma fire. The Eternal Wrath grew larger on the view screen. Zorath's flagship was massive, 3 times the size of any other vessel in the battle. It was the heart of the Valdrix Empire. If they could destroy it, the enemy fleet might break. On the Eternal Wrath, Zorath watched the human ship approaching. He knew what they were trying to do. He almost admired their courage. "Concentrate all fire on that vessel," he commanded. "Destroy it now." Dozens of Valdrix ships turned their weapons toward the Sentinel. Plasma bolts struck her shields from every direction. The ship shook violently. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge. "Shields at 10%, Samuel Patterson reported from engineering. "We cannot take much more of this." Benjamin did not hesitate. "All power to forward weapons. Prepare to fire everything we have." Catherine grabbed his arm. "Captain, if we drop the shields completely, we will be destroyed." "I know." Benjamin looked at her with calm eyes. "But if we do not destroy their command ship, the battle is lost anyway. Sometimes you have to risk everything to win." Catherine stared at him for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and released his arm. "It has been an honor serving with you, sir." "The honor was mine." The Sentinel dropped her shields and diverted all remaining power to weapons. For a brief moment, she was completely defenseless. Plasma bolts slammed into her hull, tearing through metal and killing crew members instantly. The ship was dying, but in that moment, she fired every missile, every kinetic round, every electromagnetic pulse. Everything the Sentinel had left flew toward the Eternal Wrath in a single devastating barrage. Zorath saw the weapons coming. He tried to order evasive action, but it was too late. The missiles struck his shields and overwhelmed them. The kinetic rounds punched through his hull. The electromagnetic pulses disabled his reactors. The eternal wrath began to break apart, but the damage to the Sentinel was too severe. Her engines failed completely. Her weapons went offline. She was drifting now, helpless, her crew fighting fires and trying to save wounded comrades. "Captain," Catherine said quietly, "the command ship is destroyed, but we have lost main power. We cannot fight anymore." Benjamin looked at the view screen. The eternal wrath was in pieces, debris spreading through space like the remains of a dead giant. But the battle was not over. There were still thousands of enemy ships, and the Sentinel could no longer defend herself. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel," he ordered. "Get everyone to the escape pods. What about you, sir?" "Someone has to stay with the ship. Someone has to make sure she does not fall into enemy hands." Catherine opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, new contacts appeared on the sensors. Human ships. The Resolute, Vanguard, and Defiance were coming to protect them. Sylvan vessels moved to form a defensive perimeter around the crippled Sentinel. Tvorix's voice came through the communication system. "Human ship, this is the Sylvan fleet. We have you covered. Focus on repairs. We will keep the enemy away." Benjamin felt something warm in his chest. Hope. He had almost forgotten what it felt like. With the destruction of the eternal wrath, the Valdric's fleet began to fall apart. Zorath was dead. His commanders were confused and frightened. For the first time in 3,000 years, they did not know what to do. Ships began to flee. At first, it was just a few, jumping into hyperspace without orders. Then more followed. Then more. Within 2 hours, the Grand Armada had become a scattered collection of retreating vessels. Running for their lives, the battle was over. On the surface of Earth, billions of people watched the skies and wept with joy. They had been told that the end was coming. They had been told that nothing could save them. But humanity had proven everyone wrong. The Sentinel was towed back to Earth, her hull scarred and broken, but her spirit undefeated. Of her original crew of 300, only 147 had survived. 17 had died in the first battle. 136 more had given their lives in the final engagement. Captain Benjamin Cole stood on the bridge one last time, looking at the damage around him. His ship would need months of repairs. Some said she would never fly again. But he knew better. The Sentinel would be rebuilt. She would return to the stars. Because humanity did not give up. Humanity did not surrender. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. The Valdric's dominion, weakened by their defeat, lost control of their empire. Slave species rose up everywhere, fighting for the freedom they had been denied for centuries. The coalition that had formed during the battle became permanent. A new alliance of species united against tyranny. A memorial was built on Earth in a park overlooking the ocean. It listed the names of every person who had died defending humanity. At the base of the monument was a simple inscription. They came to conquer. They found humanity instead. Captain Benjamin Cole visited the memorial every year on the anniversary of the battle. He would stand there for hours, reading the names of the crew members he had lost, remembering their faces, remembering their courage. The galaxy had changed forever. The Valdrics had terrorized countless worlds for 3,000 years. They had seemed invincible, unstoppable, eternal. But then humanity deployed a single warship, and everything changed. The stars belonged to everyone now. Because one ship and her crew had dared to fight when fighting seemed impossible. Because one species had refused to surrender when surrender was the only sensible option. Because humanity had shown the galaxy that courage and determination could overcome any enemy. The Sentinel's legacy would live on for generations. A reminder that the smallest light can drive back the greatest darkness. And somewhere, in the hearts of every being who had suffered under the Valdrix, that light would never die.